So welcome to this edition of the Secure Dynamics TechCast. With me, I have Wendy Pfeiffer, who is the Chief Information Officer at Nutanix. So welcome, Wendy.
Thank you.
So I want to pick up on something that one of your engineers, a person by name Eric Pierce, had posted on LinkedIn recently, and it just resonated so much with me. And thanks for sharing, because that's how the algorithm works. And I'm just going to read it out for our viewers. So Eric had written, I believe most people are doomed to fail to acquire new skills if they tell themselves, oh, I'll study this at night on weekends. I think the most effective way to learn something is to make it central to your day job. Try to make learning these things as real world problems at work. Start small, but start building momentum and publicize. And I find this really interesting. He says, publicize how you're adding value using that piece of technology, recruit others in this effort. And so talk a little bit about, because this is not something you typically hear from a network engineer. And he says the job has changed, and if you don't change along with it, guess what's going to happen? So talk about your organization and how, what sorts of people are retooling themselves, even though they might have a degree that may still be relevant, but increasingly the world is changing around them.
Yeah, well, I will first of all say that Eric Pierce is one of the folks on the team who is helping all of us to be able to envision how we can transform as our technology and our operational model transforms. And so, one of the benefits that our team has collectively is we have some people in the team who are actively in the process of growing and learning and reflecting what they're learning. And that is key for all of us. For IT people, this is nothing new. We have had huge uplifts in technology that have hit us like tidal waves, round after round in our careers. I'm in my mid-50s, so I've seen quite a few of these. I actually remember IT before there was internet. Just to be clear. So that was kind of huge. I was at Cisco Systems back in the day when we created the first e-commerce platform ever. And so, we've had those things hit. We've had public cloud hit. I remember a transformation in the infrastructure space was when VMware, released their virtualization technology.
Wow.
And suddenly we could get all this massive capacity out of our data centers. And as time went by, whether it was storage or memory or devices or edge computing or cloud computing, we have continuously had these opportunities to improve and grow and change. At the same time, as human beings, but especially as IT people, we tend to like predictability and process and visibility and so on. And so retooling ourselves, making ourselves capable of keeping up with that continuous change is I think the last bit of work. It's the most complex work. And nowadays we have this, I guess the competition, is that the right word? Or the juxtaposition of the way in which machine learning enabled tools and systems actually can outpace us and outdo us in that learning process unless we transform. And so that's really what this is about. And in my team, everyone in the organization is responsible to do a couple of things. So the first thing they're responsible to do is to document in English or whatever language they speak natively, to document the optimal workflow and the optimal interaction design that is required for them to deliver their key services. So a help desk person documents the optimal way to talk to an employee who needs help, and a network engineer documents the optimal way to provision a network segment, etc. And then we look at how we're actually doing things today, and look at the gap between our desired state and our current state. And then we figure out how to prioritize whatever we need to do to bridge that gap. And that next step of bridging the gap, well, it can only be undertaken by the expert who has documented the ideal process and documented their current state. So starting from that documentation, then that expert needs to figure out some way to create a description of that process and that interaction design that is machine readable, right? And so today we use low code and no code tools like Workato in Nutanix in order to just kind of help someone who might be an amazing, storage engineer or network engineer to replicate that process into their into code.
Right.
Once they have that code available, then we use machine learning tools to refine the code. So no longer does IT have to be great at everything. I can be great at designing networks, and then I can be good at using a low-code tool, and then I can let the machine refine that sort of messy code I write into really efficient code. But at the core of it is that core function that I do. In Eric's case, he has lots of skills, but network engineering is one of those. And so the trick for this, though, is in the end, you don't want to give all the credit to the machine, because what's differentiated is not that code, but what's differentiated is the underlying operational expertise and technical expertise that was that starting description. And so this is where actually, as human beings, pointing out the part that we did that is unique and valuable, and getting credit for that, and being rewarded for that. That's the culture that we've built at Nutanix, where people showcase just the cool things they came up with, the things they did to make a process better, to improve the NPS of our employees, to improve maybe the amount of work they have to do, or just make something work differently. They talk about that in terms of the thinking behind that, the process, the expertise in terms of how to deal with a risk or add some additional capability. They don't talk about it as, I made a bot. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's bringing that whole system together that actually drives a culture where people willingly keep pushing the envelope on this, pushing the envelope on this, pushing the envelope on this, so that today at Nutanix, we have really high NPS scores from our employees. We also have really positive, really cool sort of interconnection and collaboration among our teams. We have very satisfied employees. They keep rating our IT department as one of the great places to work. But at the same time, we now do somewhere between 30 and 40% of all of our work autonomously. And that is huge. As an example that Eric led, and in partnership with several other guys on the network engineering team, we just modernized 4 of our large-scale data centers. And in the old data centers, we had Cisco at the core. And Eric came back to us and said, we have this chance to modernize. What if we replaced all of our core routing and switching with a software-defined network?
Wow. And
I was against that. I'm all about stability, and like, I don't want to lose my job. What CIO loses their job having Cisco at the core?
I know you never get fired for having Cisco.
Right. It's like IBM back in the day.
Right.
But eventually he proved it out to me, and I'll tell you what. Today, all of our core routing and switching is done via a software-defined network that runs certified on commodity hardware and Nutanix AOS plus AHV. And what's awesome about that is, part one, we saved 90% of our expected CapEx spend to build out that data center. Part two, because it runs natively on our operating system and hypervisor, I don't have to have a team of CCIEs keeping network devices going. I have systems people keeping network devices going, and then a small handful of experts in network engineering who are building the process that the machine and people execute. And in this time of everyone having pivoted to work remotely, not a big deal for us. We can call infrastructure as code, and we can make any changes and any adaptations in our infrastructure that we need to, even in our physical data centers, but of course in public cloud as well, because we have taken the opportunity to document the processes, express them as code, and then they apply to this software-defined everywhere environment. That is a massive sea change to how we used to work. And the people in IT who are doing that are the heroes of Nutanix. They're the heroes of why we are productive, why we did better last quarter than we thought we would, with all of the changes, because there was no interruption to how people work when everyone pivoted to work from home and we went network inside out, because we were already working in this ideal way.
Wow. Okay. So I need to take a deep breath to digest. But two things that stood out, and you mentioned this a couple of times. I just want to double click on it, right? So for organizations out there, and again, I laughed because of software-defined network, because I used to work for a company many years ago where we came and we had this scenario that you were describing, except no one bought it, right? Because exactly like you said, which is, hey, commodity hardware, what if it goes wrong? And hey, no single neck to choke, and software from here, hardware from the hypervisor from the third thing. But this is amazing to hear. But again, going back to the final question is really for the Eric Pierces out there who have ideas, radical as they may seem at that point, but things that are actually bringing benefit to the organization, and people like you on the leadership side who are willing to let go of their current mindset to be able to absorb. How does that leadership culture, and how does that in this case, Eric's case, but it doesn't matter. I mean, IT engineers all over, or system engineers as you call them, what sort of culture that allows for this dialogue to happen? And I mean, clearly you took a risk and the risk paid off, but again, just yeah, I mean, so what sort of leadership culture, how do you allow for allowing your people like Eric to come up with ideas, and then being able to stand up there and say, okay, we are doing this, and then some cases it's going to work, like in your case, in some cases it's going to fail, and that's okay, because you need to learn from that, right?
Yeah, I think there's some things that are easy to talk about, and some things that maybe are unique to each situation. The easy things are this: as leaders, we need to have humility. We need to always act from a place of humility, and be open to hearing suggestions, to hearing new ideas, be open to raising our hands quickly and saying, if we had this fabulous plan and it's 3 weeks in and it's a disaster, let's stop. And so I think that's huge. You have to start from that point. Secondly, I think you have to measure everything. Because that just gets rid of people's ability to say it's working great, or people's ability to take pot shots and say it's not working. Right. And it just allows us to have a common lexicon. And then, starting from humility and openness, having that common lexicon, then you literally have to get in the trenches and kind of, I think as Brene Brown would say, you got to rumble together, right? You essentially have to, the biggest thing that we've done as an IT team, and I'll say as a team overall at Nutanix, is we've learned to sort of dig in and make sure we understand what the other person means. And so when I say, the employee check-in tool is bad, I hate using it, then the person I'm saying that to says back to me, well, the story I tell myself when you say that to me is that you don't think anything I do is good. Right? And boom, now we can start having the conversation. And so it's that overall interaction, that overall sort of focus on like, okay, what are our differences? What am I not understanding about you? That is super, super important.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, so those keywords that you said, which is humility, and then the ability to measure, and then really, like the example that you gave, I think I'm going to use that myself, right? Because sometimes it's like, but, or people say, but just like you said, the way you're saying this makes me believe that this, and that I think is a great dialogue conversation. And Renee Brown, again, yeah, you just took me down to a TED Talk.
And I want to share like a result. I just shared this in my staff meeting today. So we give an NPS survey at the end of every interaction that we have with anybody in the company, every time we deliver service. And this one was just so amazing. That I just wanted to share it. So,
absolutely.
Here we got, I'll just read it out loud. Here's a guy who scored us a 10, and he said, I'm continually impressed by the efficiency, initial response time beyond the bots, and time to resolution for every request I've had to IT in the 4.5 months I've been with Nutanix. The systems we have in place are top notch, but that coupled with the people we have on the team and the culture the team obviously adheres to really sets you guys apart from the rest. Best support I've seen in my career. And this is from a sales leader at the company.
Wow.
So it's the coming together of all those factors, right?
Right.
And again, we're talking about, some significant percentage of our service that's delivered autonomously. And so it's that blend of thinking about those things correctly that really matters.
Great. Again, I mean, I've never heard those kinds of remarks, especially from somebody coming in and going out of their typical, hey, checkbox, and then actually going out and saying, hey, this is what makes you different, right? So I'm sure your team must have felt energized because of that as well. So
yes,
always great. And I'm glad we've set up this monthly cadence, so we'll have more topics to chew on an ongoing basis. Again, Wendy, stay safe, and thanks for your time.
Great. I look forward to it. Thanks.